Maria Rodriguez had always been a woman of quiet elegance. She wasn't the type to wear flashy clothes or carry expensive handbags, but there was something about her presence that made people feel at ease. On this particular evening, she stood outside La Belle Époque, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, clutching a small bouquet of flowers and feeling unusually nervous. It was her wedding anniversary, and though her husband, Alejandro, was running late due to work commitments, she had decided to surprise him by arriving early. The restaurant was everything Maria imagined it would be. Grand chandeliers hung from the ceiling, soft classical music drifted through the air, and impeccably dressed waitstaff moved gracefully between tables. The entrance itself was framed by tall glass doors, reflecting the golden glow of the interior onto the street. Maria hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, smoothing down her simple navy blue dress as if trying to make herself blend into the luxurious surroundings. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Patrons whispered animatedly over glasses of fine wine, their laughter mingling with the clinking of silverware against delicate china plates. Maria glanced around, taking in the opulence without envy, but with appreciation. She didn't need extravagant things to be happy. All she cared about was celebrating another year of love and partnership with Alejandro. Still, she couldn't help but feel slightly out of place among the designer suits and gowns adorning the other diners. At the front desk, a sharply dressed man with slicked-back hair and an air of superiority greeted guests with practiced charm. This was Vincent Hartley, the owner of La Belle Époque. Known for his impeccable taste and unyielding standards, Vincent prided himself on maintaining the exclusivity of his establishment. He scanned each guest carefully, mentally noting whether they met his criteria for entry. When his eyes landed on Maria, however, his demeanor shifted ever so slightly. Maria approached the podium, offering a polite smile. "Hello," she said softly, clutching her purse tighter. "I'd like a table for two, please." Vincent raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a faint smirk. "Do you have a reservation?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Maria shook her head. "No, I'm afraid not. But my husband will be joining me shortly." "Is there any way we could still get a table?" Vincent let out a short laugh, glancing at the maitre d' standing nearby as if seeking validation for the absurdity of Maria's request. "This is a high-end restaurant," he replied coldly. "We operate strictly on reservations, surely you understand." Maria felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she nodded politely. "Of course I understand. I just thought, well, since it's our anniversary." Her voice trailed off as Vincent interrupted her with a dismissive wave of his hand. "I'm sorry, but we simply cannot accommodate walk-ins. Perhaps you'd prefer one of the cafes down the street. They're more suited to casual dining." His words stung, cutting deeper than Maria expected. She hadn't anticipated being turned away, especially not with such obvious disdain. For a brief moment, she considered arguing her case, explaining that she wasn't some random passerby but the wife of one of the richest men in the world. Yet, pride stopped her. Why should she have to justify herself to someone who judged her based solely on appearances? As Maria stepped back, unsure of what to do next, she noticed a young waiter watching the exchange from across the room. His name tag read Liam, and his expression betrayed a mix of discomfort and sympathy. Unlike Vincent, Liam seemed genuinely troubled by the way Maria was being treated. But he remained silent, unwilling to risk drawing attention to himself. Meanwhile, Vincent continued his tirade, oblivious to the growing tension. "You see, we cater to a very specific clientele here," he explained, almost as if lecturing her. "People who appreciate the finer things in life. I'm sure you'll find somewhere else that better suits your style." Each word felt like a slap, but Maria refused to let him see how much it affected her. With as much dignity as she could muster, she thanked him curtly and turned to leave. As she pushed open the heavy glass door, the cool night air hit her face, offering little relief from the embarrassment burning inside her chest. Little did Vincent know, or care, that Maria's husband was none other than Alejandro Martinez, a self-made billionaire whose influence extended far beyond the confines of their city. Together, Maria and Alejandro lived modestly, despite their immense wealth, choosing to prioritize meaningful experiences over material possessions. Tonight, however, Vincent's arrogance had robbed them of what should have been a joyous celebration. Unbeknownst to Maria, Alejandro was already on his way. Just minutes earlier, he had received her text message saying she'd arrived at the restaurant ahead of schedule. Smiling to himself, he had quickened his pace, eager to join her. What he didn't expect, however, was the scene he would stumble upon when he finally reached La Belle Époque. Maria emerged from the restaurant, her shoulders slumped and her eyes downcast. Seeing her like this instantly set off alarm bells in Alejandro's mind. He slowed his steps, concern etched across his face. "Maria?" He called out gently, his deep voice breaking through the quiet hum of the city streets. She looked up, startled, then forced a smile when she saw him. "Alejandro, you're here." He studied her carefully, noticing the faint redness in her cheeks and the way she avoided meeting his gaze. Something was clearly wrong. "What happened?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. Maria hesitated, reluctant to recount the humiliating encounter. But Alejandro's steady gaze encouraged her to speak. Slowly, she told him about Vincent's rudeness, his refusal to seat her, and the biting comments about her appearance and supposed lack of sophistication. As she spoke, Alejandro's expression remained neutral, but his jaw tightened imperceptibly. He listened patiently, letting her finish before responding. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally, his voice low and measured. "Let's go inside." Maria blinked in confusion. "Inside? But, trust me," Alejandro interrupted, his lips curving into a reassuring smile. "Leave this to me." With that, he took her arm and guided her toward the restaurant's entrance. Maria followed reluctantly, unsure of what Alejandro intended to do. One thing was certain, though. Whatever happened next, Vincent Hartley was about to learn a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. Maria hesitated as Alejandro guided her back toward the gleaming glass doors of La Belle Époque. Her heart raced, unsure of what he had planned. She tugged gently at his arm, trying to stop him. "Alejandro, please," she whispered, her voice tinged with worry. "It's not worth it. Let's just go somewhere else." But Alejandro shook his head firmly, his eyes locked on the entrance. "No, Maria," he said quietly, his tone calm but resolute. "This isn't about us anymore. It's about teaching someone a lesson they desperately need to learn." Before Maria could protest further, Alejandro pushed open the door and stepped inside, leaving her standing just outside. He turned to give her a reassuring nod, silently promising that everything would be fine. Maria sighed deeply, clutching the bouquet of flowers tighter in her hands. She didn't want any trouble, but she trusted Alejandro completely. With a small, resigned shrug, she lingered near the doorway, watching as he approached the front desk. Vincent Hartley was still there, chatting casually with one of the waiters. When he noticed Alejandro entering, his demeanor shifted instantly. His lips curled into a practiced smile, though his gaze flickered over Alejandro's casual attire, jeans, a leather jacket, and sneakers, with barely concealed disdain. To Vincent, this man looked like yet another ordinary customer, perhaps even less impressive than Maria had been moments earlier. "Good evening, sir." Vincent greeted him coolly, his tone polite but distant. "Do you have a reservation?" Alejandro paused for a moment, studying Vincent intently before responding. There was something almost predatory in the way he observed the restaurant owner. The slight tilt of his head, the sharp glint in his dark eyes. For all his wealth and influence, Alejandro carried himself with an understated confidence that often went unnoticed by those who judged others based on appearances. Tonight, however, that subtlety worked to his advantage. "No, I don't have a reservation," Alejandro replied smoothly, his voice calm and measured. "But I'd like to speak with you privately if you don't mind." Vincent raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. It wasn't every day that someone walked into his restaurant demanding a private conversation. Still, he couldn't imagine why this man, dressed so casually, would warrant such attention. Nevertheless, curiosity got the better of him. "Certainly," Vincent said, gesturing toward a secluded corner of the restaurant where a small table stood surrounded by lush greenery. "Please follow me." As they moved away from the bustling main area, Maria watched anxiously from the doorway. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she could see the tension in Alejandro's posture and the growing unease in Vincent's body language. The young waiter, Liam, also kept glancing in their direction, clearly sensing that something significant was unfolding. Once seated, Alejandro leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. His expression remained calm, almost friendly, but there was a steely edge to his words. "Mr. Hartley," he began, his voice low and deliberate, "I understand that running a high-end establishment like this requires certain standards, but tell me, do those standards include humiliating your guests?" Vincent blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you mean," he stammered, attempting to maintain his composure. Alejandro's lips curved into a faint smile, though it lacked warmth. "Let me clarify. A few minutes ago, my wife arrived here intending to celebrate our anniversary. Instead of welcoming her, you treated her with disrespect, judging her solely on her appearance and refusing to seat her because she didn't meet your arbitrary criteria." Vincent's face flushed red, partly from embarrassment and partly from irritation. "Sir, we operate on a strict reservation policy," he explained defensively. "Without a reservation, I simply cannot accommodate everyone who walks in." "That's understandable," Alejandro conceded with a slight nod. "What's not understandable is the way you spoke to her, as if she were unworthy of stepping foot in your restaurant. You made assumptions about her based on how she looked, and you dismissed her without giving her a second thought." Vincent opened his mouth to respond, but Alejandro held up a hand, silencing him. "Now let me ask you something else. Do you know who I am?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Vincent frowned, shaking his head slowly. "No, I'm afraid I don't." Alejandro leaned back in his chair, his piercing gaze never leaving Vincent's face. "My name is Alejandro Martinez. Perhaps you've heard of me. Or perhaps not. Either way, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that I have the means to ensure your business thrives or fails, depending on how you choose to handle the situation." Vincent's eyes widened in shock. The name registered immediately. Alejandro Martinez was a household name, synonymous with immense wealth and unparalleled success. Suddenly, the casual jeans and leather jacket no longer seemed insignificant. They were merely a disguise for a man who wielded extraordinary power. I didn't realize," Vincent stammered, his earlier arrogance crumbling under the weight of realization. "If I had known, you wouldn't have treated her differently." Alejandro interrupted, his tone sharp now. "That's the problem, Mr. Hartley. People like you judge others based on superficial things, what they wear, how they look, whether they fit into your idea of high class. My wife deserves respect regardless of how she dresses or whether she has a reservation, and so does everyone else who walks through that door." Vincent swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on maintaining exclusivity, believing that his strict standards elevated the restaurant's reputation. Now faced with the consequences of his actions, he realized how narrow-minded he had been. "I apologize," Vincent said quickly, his voice trembling. "I truly didn't mean to offend anyone. If there's anything I can do to make this right—" "There is," Alejandro interjected, his expression softening slightly. "First, you will personally apologize to my wife, not because I'm forcing you, but because it's the right thing to do. Second, you will implement policies to ensure that no guest is ever treated unfairly again, regardless of their appearance or background. Finally, you will publicly acknowledge your mistake, both to her and to your staff, setting an example for how this restaurant should operate moving forward." Vincent nodded vigorously, eager to comply. "Of course, Mr. Martinez. Consider it done." Satisfied, Alejandro rose from his seat, his towering frame exuding authority. "Good, because trust me, Mr. Hartley, you won't get a second chance." With that, Alejandro turned and walked back toward the entrance, leaving Vincent sitting alone at the table, visibly shaken. As he stepped outside, Maria looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and admiration. "What did you say? To him?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with awe. Alejandro smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Just reminded him that true class isn't about what you wear or where you come from. It's about how you treat others." Maria returned his smile, feeling a renewed sense of pride in the man she had chosen to spend her life with. Together they turned and walked away from La Belle Époque, knowing that the night's events would leave a lasting impact, not only on Vincent, but on everyone who witnessed them. As Alejandro and Maria walked away from La Belle Époque, the cool night air seemed to carry a sense of quiet triumph. Maria glanced up at her husband, her brow furrowed with curiosity. "Are you sure this is over?" she asked softly, her voice laced with uncertainty. "What if he doesn't follow through? What if nothing changes?" Alejandro stopped walking and turned to face her, his dark eyes filled with calm determination. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "Maria," he said firmly, "this isn't just about us anymore. It's about sending a message, not just to him, but to everyone who thinks it's okay to treat people poorly because of how they look or where they come from." Maria nodded slowly, understanding what he meant, but still feeling uneasy. She wasn't one for confrontation, and the idea of making a scene, even indirectly, made her uncomfortable. Yet, deep down, she trusted Alejandro completely. If anyone could handle this situation with grace and authority, it was him. Unbeknownst to them, Vincent Hartley was already scrambling inside the restaurant. His mind raced as he replayed the conversation with Alejandro, each word echoing like a warning bell. The name Martinez carried weight far beyond anything Vincent had ever encountered in his carefully curated world of fine dining. Alejandro Martinez wasn't just another wealthy patron. He was a titan of industry, a man whose influence stretched across continents. To cross him was unthinkable, and yet, that's exactly what Vincent had done. Panic set in as Vincent realized the gravity of his mistake. He had judged Maria based on her modest appearance, dismissing her without a second thought. Now, not only had he offended one of the most powerful men in the world, but he had also jeopardized the reputation of his beloved restaurant. The very exclusivity he prided himself on suddenly felt hollow, a fragile facade built on arrogance rather than genuine respect. Determined to salvage the situation, Vincent hurried to the front entrance, scanning the street for any sign of Maria and Alejandro. Spotting them a short distance away, he called out nervously, "Mrs. Martinez, please wait." Maria froze, her grip tightening on the bouquet of flowers she still held. She exchanged a glance with Alejandro, who gave her an encouraging nod. Together, they turned to face Vincent as he approached, his usually polished demeanor replaced by visible unease. "Mrs. Martinez," Vincent began, his voice trembling slightly, "I owe you an apology, a sincere one. My behavior earlier was unacceptable, and I deeply regret treating you with such disrespect. You deserve better, and I promise that this will never happen again." Maria studied him quietly, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she said nothing, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. Finally, she spoke, her tone measured, but firm. "Thank you for apologizing, Mr. Hartley, but I want you to understand something. It's not just about me. People shouldn't have to earn respect based on appearances or status. Everyone deserves to be treated kindly no matter who they are or what they look like." Vincent nodded vigorously, sweat beading on his forehead. "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Martinez. I've been blind to that, and I'm truly sorry. I'll make sure this restaurant becomes a place where everyone feels welcome." His words were heartfelt, though tinged with desperation. Maria could see the sincerity in his eyes even if it came too late. After a brief pause, she offered him a small, forgiving smile. "I hope you mean that," she said simply. "Actions speak louder than words." With that, she turned back to Alejandro. who draped an arm around her shoulders protectively. They resumed walking, leaving Vincent standing alone on the sidewalk, his suit jacket flapping in the breeze. He watched them go, a mix of relief and shame washing over him. Though the immediate crisis had passed, he knew this was only the beginning of a much-needed transformation, for himself and for La Belle Époque. Back at the restaurant, Vincent wasted no time putting Alejandro's demands into action. He gathered his staff in the main dining area, his hands shaking slightly as he addressed them. "Listen carefully," he began, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "Tonight I made a grave mistake, one that could have cost us everything. I judged a guest unfairly, and because of my arrogance, we nearly lost the trust of someone incredibly important." The room fell silent, the waitstaff exchanging puzzled glances. Vincent rarely admitted fault, let alone in front of his employees. Sensing their confusion, he continued, "This isn't just about one incident. It's about how we treat every single person who walks through our doors. From now on, there will be zero tolerance for rudeness or discrimination. Every guest deserves respect, regardless of how they dress or whether they have a reservation." Liam, the young waiter who had witnessed Maria's mistreatment earlier, raised his hand hesitantly. "Does this mean we'll change the reservation policy?" he asked, his voice tentative. Vincent hesitated before answering. "We'll still prioritize reservations, but we'll find ways to accommodate walk-ins whenever possible. More importantly, we'll focus on creating an atmosphere of warmth and inclusivity. No more judgment, no more assumptions." The staff murmured their agreement, some nodding enthusiastically while others exchanged skeptical looks. Change wouldn't come easily, but Vincent was determined to see it through. As the meeting concluded, he retreated to his office, sinking into his chair with a heavy sigh. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his responsibilities, not just as a business owner, but as a leader who had failed those around him. Meanwhile, Maria and Alejandro found themselves strolling along the city streets, the tension of the evening slowly melting away. The neon lights of nearby shops reflected off puddles left behind by an earlier rainstorm, casting colorful patterns on the pavement. Despite everything that had happened, Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. "You didn't have to do all that," she said finally, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "I know you wanted to stand up for me, but part of me wishes it hadn't escalated so much." Alejandro chuckled softly, his arm still wrapped around her shoulders. "Sometimes, love, standing up for what's right means taking a stand, even when it's uncomfortable. Besides, I wasn't just doing it for you. I was doing it for everyone who's ever been treated unfairly because of how they look or where they come from." Maria smiled, leaning into him. "You always did have a way of turning these moments into something bigger than ourselves." "That's because life is bigger than any one of us," Alejandro replied, his voice warm with conviction. "And if we can use our privilege to make things better, even in a small way, then why wouldn't we?" They continued walking, eventually finding themselves outside a cozy cafe tucked away on a quiet side street. Its windows glowed warmly, inviting passers-by to step inside. Without saying a word, Alejandro opened the door and ushered Maria in, earning a grateful grin from her. Inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of baked goods, creating an atmosphere of pure comfort. As they sat down at a small table near the window, Maria looked around at the eclectic mix of patrons, students hunched over laptops, couples sharing slices of pie, and elderly friends chatting animatedly over cups of tea. There was no pretense here, no judgments based on appearances, just people enjoying each other's company. "This is nice," Maria said, her voice soft but content. "It reminds me of why we don't need fancy places or expensive meals to be happy. All we really need is each other." Alejandro reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Exactly. And tonight proves that even when things don't go as planned, we can still find joy in the unexpected." Their anniversary celebration may not have unfolded the way they had envisioned, but in many ways it turned out to be more meaningful than either of them could have imagined. For Maria, it was a reminder of the importance of staying true to oneself, even in the face of adversity. For Alejandro, it reinforced his belief in using his influence to create positive change, And for Vincent Hartley, it marked the beginning of a journey toward redemption, one that would test his resolve, but ultimately lead to growth. As the night wore on, the city buzzed with life, its streets alive with stories waiting to unfold. Some tales ended quietly, while others sparked movements. But for Maria and Alejandro, this chapter closed with a simple truth. Love, kindness, and integrity were the greatest luxuries of all. The days following the incident at La Belle Époque were a whirlwind of activity for Vincent Hartley. He had always prided himself on being a man of action, but this time, his efforts weren't driven by ambition or ego. They were fueled by sheer necessity. Alejandro Martinez's warning still echoed in his mind, a constant reminder that one misstep could cost him everything he had worked so hard to build. The fear of losing not just his reputation but also his livelihood pushed Vincent to act quickly and decisively. Vincent began by implementing sweeping changes within the restaurant. First, he revised the reservation policy, ensuring that walk-ins would no longer be turned away without consideration. While reservations remained encouraged, the staff was instructed to make every effort to accommodate last-minute guests, especially during off-peak hours. This shift required rethinking how tables were managed, and Vincent hired an additional host to assist with seating arrangements, ensuring smoother operations. Next, he organized mandatory training sessions for all employees, focusing on customer service and inclusivity. These workshops weren't just about teaching proper etiquette. They were designed to challenge long-held biases and assumptions. Vincent brought in a consultant who specialized in diversity and hospitality management to lead the sessions. First, some staff members grumbled about the extra workload, but as the training progressed, many began to see its value. They learned practical skills such as how to handle difficult situations gracefully, and more importantly, they gained insight into the importance of treating every guest with dignity and respect. Liam, the young waiter who had silently witnessed Maria's mistreatment, became one of the most vocal advocates for change. During one of the training sessions, he shared his perspective openly, recounting the events of that fateful evening. "I saw firsthand how someone was made to feel small because of how they looked," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "It wasn't fair, and it wasn't right. We can do better than that." His words resonated deeply with the team, sparking meaningful discussions about privilege, judgment, and the power dynamics inherent in the hospitality industry. For the first time, the staff began to view their roles not just as jobs but as opportunities to make a positive impact on people's lives. Slowly but surely, the culture of La Belle Époque started to shift. Outside the restaurant, news of the incident spread like wildfire. Word of mouth is a powerful force, particularly in a city where gossip travels faster than traffic during rush hour. Within days, whispers of what had transpired reached the ears of local journalists, bloggers, and social media influencers. Some praised Alejandro Martinez for standing up against elitism, while others criticized Vincent Hartley for his initial behavior. A few even debated whether Alejandro's intervention was justified or if it amounted to bullying. One influencer, known for her focus on ethical dining experiences, wrote a lengthy post about the incident. She highlighted the dangers of classism in high-end establishments and called out businesses that prioritized exclusivity over kindness. Her article went viral, prompting hundreds of comments from readers sharing their own stories of being treated unfairly in restaurants. The piece caught the attention of major news outlets, which picked up the story and ran features on the growing movement to promote inclusivity in fine dining. For Vincent, the media attention was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it forced him to confront the flaws in his business model and accelerated the changes he was already implementing. On the other hand, it exposed him to public scrutiny, leaving him vulnerable to criticism from those who felt he didn't deserve a second chance. But instead of shying away from the spotlight, Vincent chose to embrace it. In a bold move, he issued a public statement, taking full responsibility for his actions and outlining the steps he was taking to ensure that La Belle Époque became a beacon of inclusivity. "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted in the statement, his tone sincere. I judge someone based on appearances, and in doing so, I disrespected not only that individual, but also the values my restaurant claims to uphold. I am committed to making things right, not just for Mrs. Martinez, but for everyone who walks through our doors. True elegance isn't about wealth or status. It's about treating others with kindness and respect. The statement struck a chord with many readers, earning praise from some quarters and skepticism from others. Skeptics argued that Vincent's apology was too little, too late, while supporters applauded his willingness to acknowledge his faults and take action. Either way, the conversation sparked by the incident continued to gain momentum, drawing attention to broader issues of inequality and discrimination in the hospitality industry. Back at home, Maria and Alejandro followed the developments with quiet interest. Neither of them had anticipated the ripple effect their encounter with Vincent would create, but neither were they surprised. Alejandro had always believed that moments of adversity could serve as catalysts for change, if handled correctly. He saw this as an opportunity not just for Vincent and La Belle Époque, but for society as a whole. Maria, however, approached the situation with a different perspective. While she appreciated the positive outcomes, she couldn't shake the feeling that the entire ordeal had been unnecessary. "Do you think all of this fuss was worth it?" she asked Alejandro one evening as they sat together on their balcony, sipping cups of chamomile tea. Alejandro set his cup down and turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. "Change rarely comes without some level of discomfort," he replied. "Yes, it would have been easier if Vincent had simply treated you with respect from the start. But sometimes people need a wake-up call, a reminder that their actions have consequences." Maria nodded slowly, understanding his point but still wrestling with her own emotions. "I just hope he means what he says," she said softly. "It's one thing to apologize publicly, but another to actually follow through. That's why we'll keep watching," Alejandro said with a reassuring smile. "If he slips up, we'll know. And if he succeeds, then maybe something good will come out of all of this." As weeks turned into months, the transformation at La Belle Époque became increasingly evident. Guests noticed a marked improvement in the quality of service, with staff members going above and beyond to ensure everyone felt welcome. The restaurant's online reviews reflected this shift, with patrons praising not just the food, but also the atmosphere of warmth and inclusivity. Even the interior design underwent subtle changes, with softer lighting and more comfortable seating arrangements replacing the stark, intimidating aesthetic that had once dominated the space. Vincent himself emerged as a changed man, or at least, a man trying to change. He spent less time obsessing over profit margins and more time connecting with his staff and customers. He introduced monthly feedback sessions where guests could share their experiences and suggestions, fostering a sense of community that had previously been lacking. Though the process was far from perfect, the progress was undeniable. One evening, as Vincent stood near the entrance greeting guests with genuine enthusiasm, he spotted two familiar faces walking toward him. It was Maria and Alejandro, holding hands and smiling warmly. His heart skipped a beat, unsure of what to expect. Would they forgive him? Or had they come to hold him accountable? "Welcome back," Vincent said nervously, extending a hand toward Alejandro. "Thank you for giving us another chance." Alejandro shook his hand firmly, his gaze steady. "We're here to see if your actions match your words," he replied, his tone firm but fair. Maria smiled kindly, her eyes meeting Vincent's. "And to celebrate our anniversary properly this time," she added, her voice carrying a hint of forgiveness. Relief washed over Vincent's face as he escorted them to a beautifully set table near the window. As they settled in, he promised to personally oversee their meal, determined to make amends in the best way he knew how. For Maria and Alejandro, the evening was a testament to the power of grace and redemption. They dined under the soft glow of candlelight, surrounded by the hum of happy conversations and the clinking of glasses. In that moment, they realized that true luxury wasn't found in opulent surroundings or expensive meals. It was found in the connections we forge and the lessons we learn along the way. And for Vincent, the night marked a new beginning, a chance to rebuild not just his restaurant but also his character. Though the road ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, he was ready to face it head-on, knowing that every step forward brought him closer to becoming the person he aspired to be. The evening at La Belle Époque unfolded with a quiet elegance that seemed almost surreal. Maria and Alejandro sat at their table near the window, bathed in the soft glow of candlelight. The restaurant's transformation was evident, not just in its updated decor but in the palpable warmth that filled the air. Waitstaff moved with genuine smiles, their interactions with guests marked by attentiveness and care. Even Vincent, who had once exuded an air of superiority, now carried himself with humility, checking in on tables personally and ensuring every detail was perfect. As the couple perused the menu, they noticed subtle changes there as well. Alongside the usual gourmet dishes, there were options designed to cater to a wider range of tastes and dietary preferences. A small note at the bottom of the page read, "At La Belle Époque, everyone is welcome. Let us create a dining experience tailored just for you." Maria couldn't help but smile, touched by the effort Vincent had clearly put into making the restaurant more inclusive. Their server approached, a young woman named Clara, whose friendly demeanor immediately put them at ease. She greeted them warmly, her eyes lighting up when she recognized Maria from the stories circulating among the staff. "It's such an honor to have you here tonight," Clara said sincerely. "We've made some adjustments based on your feedback, and I hope you'll find everything to your liking." Maria exchanged a glance with Alejandro, who gave her hand a gentle squeeze under the table. "Thank you," Maria replied softly. "We're looking forward to seeing how things have changed." Clara nodded enthusiastically before launching into a description of the evening's specials. Her passion for the food, and for hospitality, was unmistakable, and it became clear that the new training sessions had instilled a renewed sense of purpose in the team. After taking their order, she disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Maria and Alejandro alone once again. "They've really turned things around," Alejandro remarked, his voice low but approving. Vincent seemed sincere about wanting to make amends. Maria nodded thoughtfully, sipping her glass of sparkling water. "I think he is," she agreed. "But it's not just about him, it's about what this place represents now. If a restaurant like this can change, maybe other businesses will start thinking differently too." Alejandro smiled, leaning back in his chair. "That's the bigger picture, isn't it? It's not just about one person or one incident. It's about creating a culture where kindness and respect are prioritized over exclusivity." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their appetizers, a delicate arrangement of heirloom tomatoes drizzled with balsamic glaze, accompanied by freshly baked sourdough bread. The flavors were exquisite, each bite bursting with freshness and care. As they savored the meal, Maria couldn't help but marvel at how much the atmosphere had shifted since their last visit. Gone was the cold formality. Instead, there was a sense of genuine connection between the staff and the patrons. Meanwhile, Vincent hovered nearby, keeping a watchful eye on the couple without being intrusive. He knew this dinner was crucial, not only as a gesture of goodwill, but as proof that he was committed to change. Every time Maria smiled or Alejandro nodded in approval, Vincent felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps redemption wasn't out of reach after all. After dessert, a rich chocolate tart served with a scoop of homemade vanilla ice cream, Vincent finally approached their table, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. "How was everything?" he asked, his tone cautious yet hopeful. "It was wonderful," Maria replied, her voice warm but firm. "The food was excellent and the service was impeccable. You've done a remarkable job turning things around." Vincent exhaled audibly, relief washing over his face. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "Your words mean more than you know. But I want you to understand. I didn't do this just because of what happened that night. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Alejandro leaned forward slightly, studying Vincent intently. "And that's what matters most," he said. "Actions speak louder than words. Keep leading by example, and you'll inspire others to follow suit." Vincent nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. For the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of pride. not in himself, but in the progress he and his team had made. Though the journey ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, he was ready to face it head-on. Later that week, Vincent decided to take his efforts one step further. He reached out to local charities and community organizations, offering to host monthly dinners for underserved families in the area. These events would provide free meals prepared by the restaurant's chefs, along with opportunities for guests to learn about careers in hospitality. It was a bold move, one that required significant investment, but Vincent believed it was worth it. The first charity dinner took place on a crisp autumn evening. Families arrived dressed in their Sunday best, their faces filled with anticipation. Inside the restaurant, the staff had transformed the space into a welcoming haven, complete with colorful decorations and live music performed by local artists. Children laughed as they explored the dessert station, while parents mingled with volunteers and employees, sharing stories and forging connections. One guest, a single mother named Elena, approached Vincent during the event, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you for doing this," she said softly. "My kids haven't had a proper meal like this in weeks. Knowing that someone cares, it means the world to us." Vincent swallowed hard, deeply moved by her words. "No, thank you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You remind me why we're here, to serve others and make a difference no matter how small." Word of Vincent's charitable initiatives spread quickly, earning praise from both the media and the community. Local newspapers featured stories about the dinners, highlighting the positive impact they were having on families in need. Social. Media influencers shared photos and videos from the events, encouraging their followers to support businesses that gave back to society. For Maria and Alejandro, watching these developments unfold was deeply rewarding. They often discussed the incident during quiet moments at home, marveling at how something so personal had sparked such widespread change. Though neither of them sought recognition, they couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing they had played a role in making the world, even in a small way, a better place. One evening, as they strolled through their neighborhood park, Maria paused to watch children playing on the swings. Their laughter echoed through the cool night air, filling her with a sense of peace. "Do you ever wonder if we'll run into Vincent again?" she asked Alejandro, her voice contemplative. He chuckled, softly, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "Probably not anytime soon," he replied. "But even if we don't, his story will stay with us. And hopefully, it'll stay with others too." Maria nodded, leaning into him. "You're right. Sometimes the best thing we can do is plant seeds and trust that they'll grow in their own time." As the seasons changed, so did the lives of those involved in the incident. Maria and Alejandro continued to celebrate their anniversaries quietly, cherishing the simplicity of their relationship. Vincent, meanwhile, embraced his role as a leader who prioritized compassion over profit. His restaurant flourished, not because of its exclusivity, but because of the inclusivity and kindness it represented. In the end, the story of La Belle Époque became a testament to the power of accountability, forgiveness, and growth. It reminded everyone, guests, staff, and observers alike, that true luxury lies not in wealth or status, but in the connections we forge and the values we uphold. And though the road to redemption is rarely easy, it is always worth traveling, if only to discover the beauty waiting at the end. Months had passed since that fateful evening at La Belle Époque, and the ripple effects of Maria and Alejandro's encounter with Vincent Hartley continued to shape lives in unexpected ways. The restaurant, once synonymous with exclusivity and elitism, had transformed into a symbol of inclusivity and compassion. Its story was no longer just a tale of redemption for one man, it had become a beacon of hope for an entire community. Vincent Hartley, who had once prided himself on maintaining a rigid image of sophistication, now greeted every guest with genuine warmth. He spent more time interacting with his staff and customers than ever before, learning their names, hearing their stories, and ensuring they felt valued. The charity dinners he hosted became a cornerstone of his mission, drawing attention from neighboring cities and inspiring other businesses to adopt similar initiatives. What started as a personal effort to make amends evolved into a movement, one that challenged the very foundations of what it meant to be high class. The media coverage surrounding these events brought new patrons to La Belle Époque, but not the type Vincent had catered to in the past. Instead of celebrities seeking status symbols or wealthy elites chasing luxury, the restaurant began attracting families, students, and even tourists eager to experience its welcoming atmosphere. Word spread quickly about the establishment's commitment to kindness, and soon reservations were harder to come by than ever, not because of exclusivity, but because everyone wanted to be part of something meaningful. For Maria and Alejandro, life returned to its usual rhythm after the whirlwind of publicity died down. They remained private individuals, shunning the spotlight despite the growing interest in their story. Still, they couldn't help but feel proud of the impact their actions had created. On quiet evenings, they would sit together on their balcony, sipping tea and reflecting on how far things had come. "I never imagined one night could change so much," Maria said one evening, her voice filled with wonder. She gazed out at the city skyline twinkling like stars against the dark canvas of night. "It's strange to think we played a role in all of this." Alejandro smiled, setting his cup down on the small wooden table between them. "Sometimes, the smallest moments have the biggest consequences," he replied thoughtfully. "We didn't set out to start a movement. We just wanted to stand up for what was right. Everything else, well, it happened because people were ready to listen." Maria nodded, her eyes softening as she turned to look at him. "Do you think Vincent will keep going? I mean, truly keep going? Or will he go back to his old ways when the attention fades?" Alejandro hesitated for a moment, considering her question. "I believe he's sincere about changing," he said finally. "But only time will tell. Real growth isn't about grand gestures or public apologies. It's about consistency. If he continues to prioritize kindness over profit, then yes, I think he'll stay on this path." Maria sighed contentedly, leaning back in her chair. "Either way, I'm glad we gave him the chance to try." In the months that followed, Vincent faced challenges that tested his resolve. Not everyone approved of his changes. Some longtime patrons grumbled about the shift in clientele, while others complained about the relaxed reservation policy. A few even stopped coming altogether, claiming the restaurant had lost its edge. But instead of letting criticism discourage him, Vincent used it as motivation to double down on his vision. He introduced programs aimed at empowering underrepresented groups within the hospitality industry, offering scholarships and mentorship, opportunities to aspiring chefs, waitstaff, and managers from diverse backgrounds. One of his most ambitious projects involved partnering with local schools to teach students about culinary arts and entrepreneurship, giving them hands-on experience. Working in a professional kitchen. For many young people, these initiatives opened doors they never thought possible, proving that success wasn't reserved for the privileged few. Liam, the young waiter who had witnessed Maria's mistreatment, flourished under Vincent's guidance. Encouraged by the newfound emphasis on inclusivity, Liam pursued additional training in hospitality management and eventually earned a promotion to assistant manager. His journey served as a reminder that change doesn't just benefit those directly affected. It inspires others to dream bigger and aim higher. As winter approached, bringing with it frosty mornings and cozy nights by the fire, Maria and Alejandro decided to revisit La Belle Époque for another anniversary celebration. This time they made a reservation, not because they feared being turned away, but because they wanted to support the restaurant's continued efforts. When they arrived, the staff greeted them with hugs and smiles, treating them like cherished friends rather than mere customers. Vincent personally escorted them to their table, his demeanor calm and confident. "Thank you for coming back," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your presence means more to me and to this place than I can put into words." Maria reached out to touch his arm gently. "You've done incredible work, Vincent. Keep believing in what you're doing, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her words lingered in the air long after she and Alejandro settled into their seats. Over a meal filled with laughter and heartfelt conversation, they reflected on how much had changed, not just within the restaurant, but within themselves. The Aya incident had taught them both valuable lessons about resilience, empathy, and the power of standing up for what is right. The legacy of Maria and Alejandro's story extended far beyond the walls of La Belle Époque. Across the city, other restaurants began adopting similar practices, prioritizing inclusivity and accessibility. Social media campaigns advocating for ethical dining gained traction, encouraging consumers to support businesses that aligned with their values. Even larger corporations took notice, incorporating diversity and inclusion initiatives into their operations. For Maria, the experience reinforced her belief in staying true to oneself, regardless of external pressures. She often found herself sharing her story with friends and acquaintances, emphasizing the importance of treating others with dignity and respect. Her quiet strength inspired those around her to reflect on their own biases and behaviors, fostering a culture of understanding and acceptance. Alejandro, meanwhile, saw the incident as proof that privilege comes with responsibility. He used his influence to advocate for systemic change, speaking at conferences and collaborating with organizations dedicated to social justice. Though he avoided the limelight whenever possible, his message resonated deeply. True leadership lies not in wielding power, but in using it to uplift others. Years later, when asked about the defining moments of their lives, Maria and Alejandro always pointed to that single evening at La Belle Époque. It wasn't the mistreatment or the confrontation that stood out. It was the realization that even the smallest acts of courage could spark monumental change. Their story reminded people that appearances are deceiving, that wealth doesn't define worth, and that kindness is the ultimate measure of character. And as for Vincent Hartley, he emerged from the ordeal not as the same man he once was, but as someone better, someone wiser, someone who understood that true elegance isn't found in crystal chandeliers or fine china. It's found in the connections we nurture and the lives we touch along the way. In the end, the tale of La Belle Époque wasn't just about redemption or transformation. It was about humanity, about second chances, about choosing love over judgment, humility over arrogance, and action over indifference. And though the specifics of the story faded with time, its essence endured, a timeless reminder that change begins with a single step, taken by those brave enough to lead the way.